Hello. This is my little fig tree, and it's the same fig tree which you saw me plant out earlier in the year in my vlog, Fig Tree Basics. And before I planted it out, I'd kept it quite successfully in a pot for about 3 years. And it always seemed to do quite well. In fact, it always produced some little tiny figs. And indeed, happily, since being planted out in the ground, it's gone on to produce some more figs. And I've counted about 14 little figs at various stages of development. However, whenever it has produced figs, some of them have ripened before the end of the season, and some of them have not. And that began to puzzle me, because Monty Don on Gardener's World says that he always gets a large crop of figs from his fig tree. So why are some of mine not even ripening? So I decided to go away and do some research. So this vlog is a compilation of all my findings, so that if you've got a fig and you want ripe fruits from it, this vlog should help you maximize the chances of those fruits ripening before the end of the year. But before we go any further, let me just tell you why I'm wearing my gardening gloves. Whenever you are dealing with figs, whether it be pruning or cutting or pinching out the growing tips, the fig will produce a white sticky sap, and that can be an irritant on the skin, so it's advisable to wear gloves. So let's get started on my top tips for caring for your fig and helping it to produce ripe fruit. Firstly, position and location. Think about the fig's native Mediterranean climate. It likes to be in a light, warm, well-drained position. So I've put mine up against this southwest facing wall, where it absorbs sunlight all day and it enjoys the heat radiated from the bricks during the night. The ground here is very well drained because it's actually my driveway, and underneath the ground there's lots of rubble. If the roots get access to too much food and soil, it will put all that energy into the leaves, and we don't want that. We want it to put its energy into the fruits. So restrict its root run. I know that the root run on this one is very restricted because of the gravelly earth it's planted in. But some people suggest digging a hole and lining it with flagstones, simply to restrict the growth of the roots. Tip number 3, in terms of light. I'm pruning this into a fan, 2-dimensional, and that will maximize the amount of light that gets through to the fruits. Anything that grows out to the side, which will shade the fruits, I'm going to cut off, and eventually I'll have a nice fan up this wall. So you need to take steps, if you can, to maximize the light getting to your fig tree. If you find that some of the leaves are shading the fruits, it's often worthwhile to just pull them off to let the light in. Don't overfeed the fig during the fruiting season, because it will just encourage it to produce more lush vegetation. But at the same time, don't let it dry out, because if it dries out, you might suffer from fruit drop, which is where the plant sacrifices through shock some of its fruits. So you need to find that balance between keeping it watered and not overfeeding it. So let's now get on to the fruits, because there are a couple of golden rules for ripe fruits. The first one of which is the fruit will need 90 to 100, and possibly in the UK climate 110 days of warmth. And we don't always get that in the UK, which is why some of the fruits fail to ripen towards the end of the year. When we get to the time of year when the average heat and light drops below a certain level, the new growth starts to turn woody. It starts to lignify. And that prevents the fruits from getting any nourishment. And so at that moment in time, they will stop developing. So in order to achieve ripe fruit in the UK climate, you will need that 90 to 100, possibly 110 days of warmth and light. Which brings me on to the next point, which will explain why some fruits ripen and some don't. The embryonic fruits form in the axil in between the stem and the leaf. Some of those embryonic fruits will form at the end of this season. Some of them will form in the spring at the start of next season. And it's the ones that form at the end of this season which will ripen next year, simply because they've got the length of time to do it. The ones that form next spring won't have enough time in our UK climate to ripen before it gets cold again. So that is the golden rule. If you want ripe figs in the UK, they've got to come from the embryonic fruits of the previous year. The problem is they are quite susceptible to frost, and not many of them will survive the winter unless it's in the right location or unless you protect the branches during the winter time. Unfortunately, most, if not all, of the embryonic fruit that formed this year will simply not have time to ripen before it gets cold again. And as unfortunate as it might be, at the end of the year, you might as well just pull them all off and throw them away. So that really explains why some of the fruits ripen and some of them don't. And I've got some here which are quite large, and there's a reasonable chance that they will ripen before the end of this year, before it starts to get cold. But I'm afraid these little pea-sized embryonic fruits have got no chance. We're already in mid-August and there just aren't enough days of warmth left. So what can you do? Well, you can protect the branches of the fig during the winter time, and that will help protect the embryonic fruits from this year so that they will have time next year to ripen into full fruits. Now, you may have heard the phrase pinching out figs, so let me explain what that means. At the tip of each of these separate growing branches, there's a dominant tip, and the reason it's called dominant is because that growing tip produces a hormone which suppresses any growth immediately below it. And that's where the phrase apical dominance comes from, because that's your apical dominant tip. It's the apex bud. And that's why some people pinch them out. Because by pinching out the tip, you encourage the energy into the fruits immediately below it. And if you do that early enough on in the year, it gives the figs a better chance to ripen whilst there's still enough warmth left. The implication of what I've just told you is that figs produce two crops in the UK. One of them is produced on the buds from last year, and one of them is produced on the buds from this year. So the chances are it's only the embryonic fruit from last year, which makes it through the winter unfrosted, that will have time to ripen into full fruits. What I'm going to do as a bit of an experiment and to try and prove the theory is pinch out a couple of these growing tips, just to see if it makes any marked difference to the development of the fruits immediately below. But one thing to be aware of is that once you do pinch out the growing tip, it will encourage side growth and may well change the whole structure of your plant. And that's something that I need to be aware of here, because I'm deliberately trying to train mine into a fan shape, two-dimensional, against this wall. I've got 6 growing branches on my fig tree, all of which have got fruits at the end of them. So I'm now going to pinch out 3 of the 6. And the 3 I'm going to pinch are the 3 with the smallest fruits, just to see if it helps them catch up with the others. However, I'm still not expecting any of the little tiny fruits to make it to ripeness. Sadly, it's already too late for that. So let's start off with this one here. As you can see, 2 tiny little embryonic fruits here. This one about the same size as my thumbnail. This one is even smaller than my little fingernail. And there's the growing tip, and I'm pinching it out, and you can already see that sticky white sap, and that's the stuff that can be irritable on the skin. You want to avoid touching that if you can. It will soon heal up. I'm going to leave this big one at the top alone because it's got two rather plump figs already on there, and I think they're probably from last year, and I think they've got a reasonable chance of developing and ripening, but we will wait and see. They are about 1.5 to 2 inches in length, and they're already swelling quite nicely. These, however, I think are unlikely to make it, but you can see in the axil there the development of a tiny little embryonic fruit, and if I leave that dominant tip there, this will continue to grow, and we might get more little embryonic fruits developing just below it before the end of the year. And those will be the ones, I hope, that will make it to next summer and ripen off. So that one is going to be left alone. Now let's pinch out another two. Let's go with this one here just to the right of the big one. And again, there's the dominant tip. And let's just pinch that out, and it's already producing a white sap. Look at it, it's like milk. Let's now record how large they are. That one's about the same size as my thumbnail, and again that one about the same size, slightly larger than the other as my little fingernail. And we can come back and review this in a few weeks' time to see what effect pinching out that growing tip has had on these two little figs compared to the bigger neighbours here. And finally, let's remove the tip from this little trio of figs. Out it comes, there's the sap, and there's 3 little figs. They are quite small really, probably about 1 centimetre but skinny, and 0.5 centimetre there. So there is my compact but complete, I hope, guide to keeping figs and helping them to produce ripe fruits in the UK. I hope it's been useful. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please do subscribe to my channel and hit the notifications bell. Also, comment below, what success have you had with your figs, if any, and what tips have you got? And I'll see you soon.